The 43rd floor of the Meridian Tower was supposed to be empty at 11:40 on a Tuesday night, and that was exactly why Carmen loved it. She pushed her cart down the darkened corridor, wheels ticking over marble, the city spread beneath her in a field of cold electric light. This was the only hour that belonged to her. No one looked at her here. No one looked at her anywhere anymore. She had spent a decade making sure of it, but here the not looking felt like peace instead of erasure. Here she could hum under her breath and pretend the empire beyond the glass was hers to keep clean and nothing more. She did not know that behind the frosted doors of the East Conference Room, 12 men were about to fail, and that her carefully built silence was about to shatter like a dropped glass. She heard the voices first, raised, then sharp, then that particular quality of quiet that comes right before something breaks. Carmen slowed. The East Wing was supposed to be locked down tonight, her supervisor had been explicit. Important guests. Skip that floor. She had every intention of obeying. But the door was open a crack, and through it drifted a word. Not English, not the smooth boardroom Italian she sometimes overheard from the finance men. Something older, with stones in it, and salt, and the particular music of a valley she had spent 12 years trying to forget. The word was conosciuto stranger, but bent in the old way, the way only the mouths of the Madoni Mountains bent it. Carmen's hand went still on the cart. She should have kept walking. God, how many times afterward would she lie awake and wish she had kept walking? Inside the room, Antonio Riva was watching a negotiation die. He sat at the head of the glass table, motionless, which was how he did most things. Stillness was his native tongue. Men who moved a great deal were nervous, and nervous men made mistakes, and Antonio Riva did not make mistakes. This was the entire architecture of his life, 30 years in the building, and it was collapsing tonight over a problem so stupid he could taste iron at the back of his throat. Nobody could understand the old man. Don Salvatore Grasso sat at the far end, ancient and dry as a riverbed, flanked by 5 silent nephews and a lawyer who kept dabbing his forehead. The Grasso family controlled 3 Sicilian ports and a shipping arrangement Antonio needed, the way a drowning man needs air, a route the federal watchers had never mapped because it moved through channels older than the country doing the watching. The deal was worth more than money. It was worth invisibility, the only thing Antonio had ever truly wanted to buy. But Don Salvatore refused to speak anything but the dialect of his mountains. Not stubbornness, Antonio had understood that within 10 minutes, but strategy. A family that could not even hear him was a family that could not be trusted to move his cargo. And the interpreters, 12 of them, flown in, vetted, paid obscenely, had produced 12 variations of the same humiliation. He says, the current one tried. Sweating, he says, the road is, I'm sorry, sir, it's pre-unification construction. I can catch maybe one word in. Out, Antonio said. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. The interpreter went. Don Salvatore watched this with the flat black eyes of a man who has buried more sons than he can be bothered to count, and murmured something to his nephews, and the nephews laughed. Antonio understood the laugh without the words. This soft king in his glass tower who cannot even hear, and Antonio Riva who had built himself into a man with no country, no accent, no valley, felt the old shame rise in his chest like floodwater, because he could hear it. Somewhere under 30 years of Manhattan, a boy who had once known those words was screaming at him from the bottom of a well he had bricked over with his own hands. He opened his mouth to end the meeting, and a voice came from the doorway. It said, in the dialect of the Madoni, in the exact bent, salted, stone-worn cadence of Don Salvatore's own mountains, one clean sentence. He is not insulting you. He is saying the mountain road washed out in 90, and the young men do not know where the old road ran, but you do. He is asking whether this stranger is worth the trouble of remembering. The room did not breathe. Antonio turned his head. She stood half in the doorway, half in the dark of the hall, one hand still gripping the handle of a yellow mop bucket. A cleaning woman, grey uniform, sensible shoes, a soft, full body built for comfort rather than the sharp angles this room manufactured. She was perhaps 40. She had the kind of face the world was designed to slide past, and every man at that table was now staring at it as though it had risen from the sea. Don Salvatore Grasso rose slowly from his chair. His dry old voice cracked out a single word, and the word was a name, and it was not Carmen. Carmela. Antonio watched the color leave the woman's face, watched her understand, in real time, that she had just made the worst mistake of a life apparently built entirely from avoiding this exact moment, watched her step back into the safe dark of the hall. Antonio did not move. He did not call out. He simply set 2 fingers against the table's edge, a small signal, invisible to everyone but the man at the door, and the door to the private elevator behind him unlocked with a soft click. He had learned long ago that the loudest thing a powerful man can do is remain perfectly still while arranging every exit around him. The cleaning woman turned and ran a heavy, graceless, utterly human run, the bucket abandoned, water spreading across the marble like something spilled from a wound. And Don Salvatore began to speak very fast to his nephews. And this time, Antonio caught every third word, and every third word was a blade. Dead, supposed to be the Falcone girl she took. She owes. Antonio rose without hurry, buttoned his jacket, and inclined his head to the old man, as though nothing at all had happened. Then he went after her. He did not chase. Chasing frightens prey. He walked, and he knew the building better than she did. And he was waiting at the service elevator when she reached it, one shoulder against the wall, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. She stopped dead, jabbed the button, jabbed it again. "It won't come," he said quietly. "I've held every car on this floor, not to trap you, to keep them upstairs a little longer than you." He tilted his head toward the ceiling, toward the room full of Grasso men. "They will kill you. That is not a threat. It is arithmetic. You have perhaps 4 minutes before the old man decides guests need not be polite." She turned to face him, and her chest was heaving, and her eyes were bright with a fury he had not expected. "Then let them," she said. Her English was flawless, unaccented, American, the voice of a woman who had scrubbed her origins off with the same patience she scrubbed these flaws. "I am so tired of running from that family. Let the old man finish it." "You don't mean that." "You don't know what I mean." She stepped toward him, and it was the opposite of shrinking. It was a woman done with being handled. "I don't know who you are, and I don't care, and I am not getting into a locked box with a strange man who just admitted he traps women in elevators. Move." Something moved behind Antonio's eyes, not offense, interest. He stepped aside at once, out of her path, both hands still in his pockets, giving her the whole width of the corridor. "There's a coal chute in the old freight bay," he said, 2 floors down, the stairs at the end of this hall. It lets out in an alley behind the loading dock. My car is black. The plate ends in 7 to 7. The driver's name is Tommaso, and he is expecting a woman, not a man. He paused. "Or take the stairs to the street and run into a city where 3 cars of Grasso men will find you by morning, because they always have, everywhere you have hidden, for 12 years. Your choice. I have made my last one." And he turned and walked back toward the room, toward the danger, away from her because he had understood something about Carmela Falcone in 90 seconds that no interpreter had told him. The surest way to make her run toward a thing was to stop pushing her at it. He heard her behind him after 4 steps. "Who are you?" she said. He stopped, did not turn. "Someone who was born in your mountains and has spent 30 years pretending he wasn't." He let that sit. "The way you said Carmela just now, the mountains stress on it. I have not heard my mother's language spoken correctly in this country in my entire life." Only then did he look back at her. 12 men failed me tonight, Signora. You did it in 1 sentence, holding a mop, without trying. I don't want to trap you. I want to hire you. And I would like both of us to still be alive to discuss the terms. For 1 long second, in a glass tower 43 floors above a city that knew neither of them, 2 people who had spent their whole lives pretending to be no one recognized each other. Then the elevator above them chimed the Grasso men, coming down, and Carmen made her choice, and it was not surrender, it was strategy. She had, after all, been raised by the same mountains he had. 7-7, she said, "and if you touch me, I will put out your eye." "I would not dream of it," said Antonio Riva, and meant it. The safe house was a brownstone in a part of Brooklyn money, had forgotten on purpose, warm, shabby, anonymous, and for 3 days Carmen did not leave it, and Antonio did not stay in it. That was deliberate. He came in daylight, sat across the kitchen table, asked his questions, and left before dark. And each night, a different one of his people slept downstairs, so that she never had to sleep under the same roof as a man she did not trust. He had noticed the way she checked the locks. He arranged for her to have a key he did not hold a copy of. He said nothing about any of it. She noticed. She said nothing either, but she noticed. "You keep leaving," she said on the second day, watching him gather his coat while the sun was still up. "Powerful men don't usually leave." "No," he agreed. "They usually stay and call it protection." He shrugged the coat on. "You've had enough of powerful men who stay. I can read a room, Signora. Even a small one with bad wallpaper." He watched her make coffee the old way, in a battered little mocha pot she found in the cupboard, and the smell of it undid something in his chest 30 years gone. And suddenly he was 6 years old and the mountains were still real. He did not tell her that. He simply drank 2 cups instead of 1, and she noticed that too. He learned almost nothing from his questions. She answered in fragments, gave up no secrets, watched the street with the vigilance of a woman who had been hunted before. But he learned other things, that she read paperbacks down to the spine, that she hummed when she thought she was alone, that she had a mind like a blade behind a face the world was built to ignore, and that this, the gap between what she was and what she was permitted to be, was the great buried fury of her life. He did not tell her to stop hiding it. He had no right. Instead, on the 3rd day, he left a book on the table, a slim thing in the old dialect, poems from their valley, 100 years out of print and no note, and he was gone before she found it. She read it that night, alone, and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, because he had not tried to touch her, or save her, or claim her. He had simply handed her a piece of the home she thought she had lost, and asked for nothing. That, she thought, was more dangerous than any of it. The Grasso family found the brownstone on the 5th day. They came at the grey hour before dawn, 3 cars, quiet as professionals, and if Antonio's people had been 1 degree less paranoid, it would have ended there. Instead, they were shouting, then glass, then the flat crack of gunfire in a residential street, and Carmen came awake to the sound of the coal chute cover being thrown open, and Antonio Riva's voice in the dark, very low, very calm. "The chute. Now. Tommaso's at the far end. I'm behind you." She went. He came last, always last, putting his own body between her and the mouth of the alley without seeming to decide to, and when a shape moved at the far end, he fired twice and it fell, and he did not so much as glance at it. He kept one hand flat against the small of her back, moving her, steering her through the blue dark, a wall of a man in a wool coat, and Carmen, running for her life, felt something she had no right to feel and hated herself for feeling. She felt safe. They made the car. He drove them out himself, blood on his collar that was not his own, hands perfectly steady, and only when they were across the bridge did she realize she was shaking, and he was not. "You killed a man," she said. "You didn't even look. He would have killed you. A beat. I looked at what mattered." He did not glance at her when he said it. He kept his eyes on the road, and that the refusal to make it a moment, to collect the credit, landed harder than any look could have. He took her to the penthouse after that. No more safe houses. If they were coming, he said, let them come to him, on his ground, into his teeth. The penthouse sat atop his own tower, all black glass and cold stone and a single warm lamp, and it was the loneliest, beautiful place Carmen had ever stood inside. That was the night she found the file. It was on the desk, and she would wonder, later, whether he had left it there carelessly or on purpose, because Antonio Riva did nothing carelessly. A folder with her name on it, her real name, Carmela Falcone, and inside, photographs. Not surveillance of these last 5 days, photographs going back years. Carmen leaving the Meridian Tower at dawn, Carmen at a bodega, Carmen on a bench in a park she loved, 3 winters ago, feeding pigeons, not knowing she was seen. Her hands went cold, and then they went to ice, and then something in her that had spent 12 years coiled tight finally snapped. "You've been watching me," she said when he came in, and her voice was terrible in its quiet. "For years." Antonio went very still in the doorway. Yes, get away from the door. He moved from it at once, crossed to the far side of the room, put the whole width of it between them, and stood with his hands loose at his sides where she could see them. He understood exactly what she was doing, and he let her do it. 3 years, he said. "You should know the number. It's worse than you're guessing." "Worse," she laughed, and there was no humor in it. You think I don't know this? You think I haven't met your kind before? A powerful man decides a woman is a thing he wants, and he watches, and he learns her, and he tells himself it's love, because no one has ever once told him no. She was shaking now, but it was rage, not fear. I was 19 the last time a powerful man collected me like a painting. I killed him for it. So think very carefully, Mr. Reaver, about what you say next. Because I have done it before, and I built my whole life around never letting it happen again, and I will walk out that door and into the Grasso guns before I let you finish what he started. The silence stretched to the edge of breaking. And Antonio Riva, feared by senators, obeyed by killers, a man who had not explained himself to another living soul in 30 years, did the one thing she did not expect. He did not defend himself. He did not step closer. He reached into the folder, took out the photographs, all of them, and set them one by one into the cold hearth. Then he struck a match and dropped it, and the two of them stood in that cold, beautiful room and watched 3 years of her stolen image curl into smoke. There, he said, when they were ash. Now no one has them, including me. If you walk out that door, I will not follow you, and I will not watch you, and I will put 4 of my people between you and the Grasso family, and you will never see them or me again. You have my word, which I have given to 3 living people, and I have never broken it. She stared at him. Then why did you watch me at all? For the first time in the conversation, he looked at the floor, like a boy. Because 3 years ago I passed you in a corridor at 2 in the morning, he said, and you did not know who I was. And you smiled at me, an ordinary smile, a human smile, and you said, "Careful, the floor's still wet." He raised his eyes. No one had worried about my safety in 20 years, Signora. Not once. Every soul in my life looks at what I can do for them, or what I can do to them. You looked at a tired man on a wet floor and did not want him to fall. His jaw tightened. I told myself it was nothing. I looked, the way a starving man looks through a window at a warm room. It was wrong. I know it was wrong. I am not asking you to forgive it. I burned it because you asked, and I would burn a great deal more than photographs before I would ever be the second man who took your choice from you. That's not love, Carmen whispered. That's a haunting. I know, Antonio said. I have never known how to tell the difference, but I know it is yours to name, not mine. So name it, and I will obey. She did not answer. She went to the window instead and stood with her back to him for a long time, watching the smoke of her own stolen face rise up the flue and vanish. And when she finally turned around, she did not tell him she forgave him. But she did not leave. I'm staying, she said, because the Grasso family is out there, and this is the safest ground, not because of you, and you will keep the width of this room until I say otherwise. Yes, Antonio said, and sat down in the far chair, and did not move an inch closer for 2 days, and Carmen, watching him keep a promise no man in her life had ever kept, felt the ice around one small chamber of her chest begin, against her will, to thaw. She told him the rest herself, on the 3rd night, because a secret carried alone for 12 years grows too heavy to hold, and because he had earned, if not her trust, at least her attention. You want to know what the old man wants, she said. Why the Falcone girl is worth 3 cars of men. Antonio said nothing. He had learned, with her, the power of not filling silence. I was 19. They promised me to Salvatore Grasso to settle a war between our families, a girl for peace. It's older than either country you and I pretend to be from. She wrapped her arms around herself, and this time he did not tell her to stop, and this time she did not catch herself and shrink. The night before the wedding, Salvatore's brother, Nino, came to my room. He'd been drinking. He decided the bride should be broken in before the vows, as a joke, as a favor. She stopped. Started again, flat and clear. I had a knife. All the Falcone girls carried knives. It was the one thing our fathers gave us instead of protection. I did not mean to. But he was strong, and the blade was between us. And when it was over, he was on the floor and not breathing. And I understood no one in that valley would ever believe a girl over a dead Grasso man. So you ran. I ran that night with the blood still on my hands, and I have not stopped since. I changed my name. I made myself no one, because no one is the only thing they don't hunt. Her eyes came up, wet and steady. Salvatore never learned the truth. He thinks Nino ran, or drank himself into a ditch, or died in the war. He has spent 12 years hating the Falcone girl for leaving him at the altar. He does not know she is the reason his brother is in the ground. If he ever learns it, there is no route, no money, no negotiation on earth that saves me. Antonio understood then the full shape of what she carried. Not a jilted engagement, a death one that would call, in that valley's grammar, for a death in return. He crossed the room, slowly, watching her face for any flinch, ready to stop. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel the cold still clinging to his coat, not close enough to touch. His hand did not rise. He kept both of them at his sides, in plain sight, and let the nearness itself be the only thing he offered. "I have kept your first secret for 5 days," he said quietly, in the dialect. "I will keep this one until they put me in the ground, not because I want anything, because it is yours, and a person's own name is the one thing no one should be able to take." He held her eyes. "That is all. I am going to step back now." And he did. He stepped back and turned and left her alone with the fire, and Carmen stood in the cold, beautiful room and understood that she was in far more danger than the Grasso family had ever posed, because the most powerful man she had ever met had just been given the perfect weapon against her and had chosen, instead, to hand her the width of the room. The trap, when it came, wore the face of mercy. Salvatore Grasso sent word he would take the deal after all. The route, the invisibility, all of it. Antonio could have everything, on one condition. The old man wished only to see the Falcone girl one last time, to make his peace before he sailed home. A dinner, neutral ground, an old man's sentiment. Antonio knew it was a lie. Everything Grasso offered came wrapped around a hook, but the alternative was a war on his own soil with Carmen in the middle of it, and Carmen, when she heard, made the decision before he could forbid it. "I'll go," she said. "You will not." Antonio. It was the first time she had used his name, and it stopped him cold. "I have run from that man for 12 years. I am done. Either I face him with you beside me, on your ground, with your people, or I run again, alone, forever, and I am tired of being no one." She lifted her chin. "You burned my photographs because I told you to. So respect me enough to let me choose the harder thing too." And Antonio Riva looked at this soft, quiet, catastrophic woman who had dismantled 30 years of stone and did the hardest thing he had ever done. He let her choose. "Then we go together," he said, "and I want you to understand one thing before you walk in, so you never have to wonder." He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. "I will not throw myself in front of anything for you. You have had enough men decide what to do with your body. If it comes to it in that room, you will not need me to shield you. You will have already handled it, and I will simply be there when it's done, cleaning up. That is the only vow I'll make you. Not to save you, to trust that you don't need saving." Carmen looked at him for a long moment. It was, she realized, the single most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. The dinner was held in the old ballroom of a hotel that had been grand a century ago and was now only haunted gilt peeling from the ceiling, candles instead of light. Grasso's men lined one wall, Antonio's lined the other, and down the center of that long, dead, elegant room walked Carmen, not in grey, not shrinking, in a dark dress she had chosen herself, her head high. Don Salvatore rose when she entered. The old courtesy, the wolf's manners. "Carmela Falcone," he said, in the mountain tongue, "back from the dead. You cost me a bride and a season of my life. I have wondered 12 years why you ran." And Carmen, standing in the candlelight, Antonio, a still shadow at her shoulder, understood that the old man already half knew, that the not knowing was the only thing keeping the room from catching fire. She had one card, and she understood, looking into those flat black eyes, that the only way to survive the wolf was to stop being prey in front of him. So she set the card down herself. "I ran," she said, clear and steady, in the dialect of both their mountains, "because your brother Nino came to my room the night before the wedding to take what was not his, and I killed him for it, with a Falcone knife, and I have never once been sorry." The room stopped. Don Salvatore Grasso stared at her for a long, long moment, and then the old man, the wolf, the debt keeper of the mountains, began, very softly, to laugh. It was a terrible sound, dry and broken, and it went on too long. "Nino," he said at last, wiping one eye. My brother Nino. He looked at her with something no one expected. Exhaustion. Grief. You think I did not know what my brother was? You think you were the first girl? He shook his head. I have hunted a ghost 12 years to avenge a man I was ashamed to share blood with. I called it honor. It was only habit. His black eyes found hers. You did the valley a mercy, girl, and I hated you because hating you was easier than hating him. He sat down heavily, suddenly only an old man, very far from his mountains. Take your route, he said to Antonio, not looking at him. Take the girl. Take all of it. I am done feeding a debt that was always a lie. And then, to Carmen, quieter, almost gentle, go and be alive, Carmela. One of us should. It should have ended there. In stories, it ends there. But down the wall, among the silent nephews, one young man had not moved, had not breathed, had gone the color of ash, Nimo. Nino's son raised across 12 years on a single poisoned story, the Falcone witch who murdered his father and vanished. He had come for blood, and the old man's mercy had just taken it from his hands. He did not draw a gun, he drew a knife. And Carmen saw, in the candlelight, exactly what it was, a Falcone blade, her family's make, the twin of the one she had left buried in his father 12 years ago, carried all this way, kept sharp all these years for exactly this. He had come to kill her with her own history. He lunged not at her, at Antonio, because a boy raised on that story does not kill the witch first. He takes from her the thing she loves, so she will understand, before she dies, what she took from him. And here was the moment the old Carmela would have frozen. Here was the moment the girl who ran for 12 years would have watched, helpless, while a Grasso man took another thing she loved. She did not freeze. Antonio was already turning, already reaching, but he had made her a vow, and some deep part of him honored it even now. A half-second's hesitation, a refusal to simply throw his body down and make her watch it happen to him too. That half-second was hers. Carmen moved. 12 years of vigilance, 12 years of watching every room for the exit, 12 years of a body the world had dismissed as soft and slow, and she was neither. She caught the boy's knife arm the way her father had taught her before he sold her, turned into him instead of away, and used the whole of her weight, all of it, every inch the world had spent her life telling her to be ashamed of, to drive him off his line. The blade meant for Antonio's throat opened the cold air where he had been. The two of them went down together, Carmen and the boy, and she got her hand around his wrist, and she did not let go. "Guardami," she said into his face, in the mountain tongue. "Look at me. I am not a story your family told you. I am the woman your father would not stop touching. I did not steal him from you. He did that himself." Her grip crushed down until the blade fell from his fingers and rang against the parquet. "You do not have to carry his debt. I am giving it back." And she let him go. She rose. She left the boy on the floor, alive, weeping not the corpse he had come to make, not the corpse he had come to be. She had broken the chain the only way it can be broken, by refusing, at last, to add another link. Antonio had not moved. He stood exactly where his vow had left him, and on his face, the coldest face in New York, was something no living person had ever seen there. Ave. They did not speak of it that night. That was not their language. He drove them home himself, and somewhere on the bridge his hand left the wheel and crossed the small, cold distance of the seat and rested, palm up, on the leather between them, not reaching, not taking. An offer, left open, the way she had taught him. Carmen looked at it for a long time. Then she put her hand in his. That was all. Two people who had spent their whole lives pretending to be no one, holding hands across the console of a black car above a sleeping city, and it was louder than any vow shouted through blood. The winter was long and quiet. The Grasso route made Antonio richer and more invisible than ever, which was all he had wanted before he learned there was something he wanted more. Mimo went home to the mountains carrying a debt that had, for the first time in the family's memory, simply been forgiven, and something in that valley, some ancient wheel that had turned on blood for 6 generations, ground quietly to a halt. Carmen stayed, not in grey, not shrinking. She filled the cold penthouse with the smell of the mocha pot every morning, and she read to him in the dialect on the nights his old shame kept him from sleep, and slowly, Slowly. The boy at the bottom of the well came up into the light and stayed. He never told her he loved her in words. That was not his language, and she came to understand that it never would be, and that this was not a lack but a gift. He told her in the width of a room offered, and never crossed until she crossed it first. In a book left without a note, in a hand laid open on the leather, in the fact that, of all the vows a dangerous man could have made her, the one he kept was the vow not to save her, to stand back and trust that she never needed saving. They married in the spring, in a small stone church in a valley neither had seen in decades, the Madoni Mountains rising blue and eternal behind it. Don Salvatore did not come too old, he said, for weddings, but he sent one line, in the old tongue, that made Carmen weep at the altar, a living bride at last. The valley is glad of it. Antonio stood at the front of a church in the country he had spent 30 years denying, holding the hand of a woman he had once watched through windows and had learned, instead, to simply stand beside. When the priest asked if he took her, he did not answer in English, or in the smooth Italian of his boardrooms, but in the salt and stone dialect of the mountains that had made them both. With everything I hid, he said, looking only at her, and everything I have left, yes. And Carmela Falcone, who had been no one for 12 years, who had walked into a glass tower with a mop, and walked out with her own name back in her mouth, looked up at the most dangerous man in the world, the only one who had ever heard home in her voice, and gave him the ordinary human smile that had started all of it. "Careful," she whispered, in the old tongue, in their tongue, the floors still wet. He did not laugh loudly. He never did anything loudly. He only closed his eyes and let his forehead come to rest against hers, and stood there, a moment in the still center of the church, a man who had spent his whole life keeping every exit open, choosing, at last, to stay. Outside, the black cars waited in the sun, and for the first time in either of their lives, neither of them was running from anything at all. For 12 years she made herself into a flaw no one noticed, a voice no one heard, and in the end, the one man who could have owned her simply laid his hand open on the seat and waited for her to reach across the distance herself. That is the whole story, really. Not a woman rescued, but a woman finally trusted to stand. The bravest thing anyone ever gave her was the space to save herself. If Carmen and Antonio earned a place in your heart tonight, leave a like so this story finds the next person who needs to hear that they were never invisible. Subscribe if you want to stay in this world a little longer. There's always another door left open. And if someone you love has spent too long making themselves small, share this with them. Then tell me, was Antonio's vow not to save her the most romantic thing he could have done, or the most dangerous?